the zone to be. From a yin to my yang to my yang to Z. Put a grin on my chin when you come to me. Cause I'll win, I'm a one of a kind, and I'll bring death to the place you're about to be. Another river of blood running under my feet. Forging a fire lit long ago. Stand next to me, you'll never stand alone. I'm last to leave, but the first to go. Lord, make me dead before you make me old. I feed on the fear of the devil inside of the enemy faces in my sight. Aim with a hand, shoot with a mind, kill with a heart like Arctic ice.
I am a soldier and I'm marching on.
I am a soldier and I'm marching on.
I am a warrior, this is my song.
I am a warrior and this is my song. I bask in the glow of the rising war, lay waste to the ground of an enemy shore.
I read you, Lima Charlie, loud and clear.
Welcome to another episode of Stu and the Nun presents Lima Charlie. We're here today with Stephen Moore. Welcome, Stephen.
Hey, how's it going?
So let's tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. Well, I did 17 years in the Army as a combat engineer, and that was ended due to a training accident and some other injuries from deployments and things just ended up catching up with me. But I did 17 years, 3 combat deployments, and then some stateside deployments and emergency missions and things like that. And I'm currently sitting at about 80% with the VA. So I'm a disabled veteran. And, of course, I've got, some things that go on with me. I've got some disabilities that, you fight through every day and things. But I served my time in the Army, and I did a little bit of active duty, a little bit of National Guard. So I've got, both experiences with that. But I did some time with infantry teams too. So I got that experience as well. But majority of it was combat engineer, and we did route clearance and QRF and recovery missions. And then we did some, security missions, taking supplies back and forth. But I mean, for the most part, that's what I did. And then when I got out, I still was in a spot in my life where I was not necessarily lost my purpose, but I didn't have the drive that I did when I was in, because I was disconnected from that and and then being disabled. So I found that being in the woods and off-roading and overlanding was a way for me to find nature as a therapeutic medicine for myself. And that's how I, cleared my head and things. And then in that, I found there was tons of veterans that were, doing the same and whatnot. So I try my best to work with any nonprofit organization or veterans organizations that have the same goals or missions to help other veterans, with their mental health illnesses or physical barriers or whatever, and get them out in the outdoors to find that sense of peace or ways to clear their head as well. So, I mean, that way, we've all got the same stories. They may be a little different, but in a sense, they're all the same. But that's what I do. And I started that, and I started doing a channel on social media, and my channel is More Adventures. It's a young channel, but my goal is to go out and see the things off grid that you can't just find day to day, and camp remotely off grid, and just use that as like a trail therapy to clear my head and get my peace of mind, but at the same time reach out to veterans and help them with any struggles they may have and introduce them to the same thing that I grew to have a huge passion for. And it's worked out pretty well.
Okay, let's talk about 12 Bravo real quick. So, what do you come from a military background? I mean, do your any of your family members in the military?
My dad's dad. So my grandpa, he was in for a little bit. He did a little bit of the Korean War, and I had some great uncles that were in, and they were all Army and stuff. And then I have some cousins that were in the Army. And then, it was just, friends that I grew up with ended up in military and whatnot. So
was Army your first and only choice, or did you think about any of the other
Uh,
branches?
no, I chose the Army because when I first got in, I was young, I was 17. I didn't know what I really wanted to do, but I've always had that sense where I wanted to join the military, and I liked what the military brought and the benefits of it. And as a young kid, I was like, well, I can get in, I can do this, and I can do something else in my life, and then I can figure out what I want to do later on. I can get college paid for, I can get, different help and whatever. Well, I chose to do that in the Army, but I had looked actually at the Marine Corps as well. But, being young, I hadn't been away from home much. So me and a friend of mine, which he is still he's actually a first sergeant now. And we joined in together and we went Army and went to boot camp at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. And we deployed together. We did all kinds of stuff together. And but the Army wasn't necessarily my first choice. I could have went the Marine Corps, but that was my two top picks. And then I ended up choosing to go to the Army. But there's days, I don't necessarily regret it, but anybody that's been in the military knows it's kind of like a roller coaster. You have your ups and downs and goods and bads. So
what about combat engineer? I mean, was that kind of a choice that you wanted, or did you think of any other job in the Army? Or
well, when I was young, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and I didn't know a lot about the different jobs and their titles. But as a young kid, and you have the option to get a sign-on bonus, and then people are shining these big numbers in your face. It was kind of funny because I went to the recruiter there in Jonesboro, Arkansas, and was talking to them, and he said, "How about this?" He said, "You want to get paid to blow shit up?" And I said, "Yeah, that sounds pretty fun, actually. Tell me more about it." And he's like, "Well, here's what we got." And I got in 03, 04, and the end of 03, beginning 04, and I think back then the sign-on bonus was like 12,000, 14,000. It wasn't like it is now where you get 20, 30,000 in one lump sum. But but yeah, I started that as a combat engineer, and as soon as I turned 18, I signed them papers, and the week after graduation, I left to go to Fort Leonard Wood and start that process, and did that all in one shot, and started my military career as a young kid with no experience doing anything but playing in the mud and racing cars and riding four-wheelers.
so school typically ends around May timeframe. So you're getting into you May, June, right? So you're at Fort Leonard Wood in June. What's it like?
Yeah. So I went in, let's see. No, I got in March. Oh, it's okay. So that's, I signed up for the Army and stuff in March on my 18th birthday. So then I had to wait until I graduate high school. So 2 weeks after that,
Okay.
I went.
So that's still early in the
It's
year
just-
when it can be a little chilly. I mean, versus the sweltering heat, right?
Well, that,
I mean,
yeah,
Missouri's pretty miserable.
yeah. Well, I was there long enough that I hit a little bit of both. So,
Okay.
and I mean, I didn't get held back, but you do your basic training part, and then you graduate that, and then you got to do your AIT section. Well, there was a holdover period for the people coming in for AIT and all that. So
Right.
it ended up being, I pretty much was there better part of the year. But
Right. So
But
what'd you think? I mean, you're in the Army, you go through this, one unit training, one station training. What was it like for you? Was it pretty easy? Was it, I mean, what
well,
was it like?
back then I was real active in sports and everything. So I was probably in the best shape for an 18-year-old to go through. So I didn't have that struggle that some people did going in of having to get yourself in shape. I was already in pretty good conditioning, pretty good shape, or you think you are, and then they start breaking you down, and they're in their way of breaking you down to build you up, and the running was nothing. The running didn't bother me. It was that other stuff that, I learned how to use different parts of my body, the muscles of my body that I wasn't using, wasn't working out, but
Right.
it worked out good. I mean, I had a good time. I enjoyed it. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about myself, and then, with that, you get tore down and then you get built back up. So, and as an 18-year-old, that's my first time I'd ever been away from home.
Oh, wow.
I'd never been away from my family and stuff back then
Right.
for that amount of time. So that was, a new experience for me, but, did that. And then I come home and went to report to my unit. Cause I was Army National Guard when I first got in.
Hmm.
Went up there to report and they weren't there. There was nobody at my unit. There were some guys there in the office and I was like, hey, it's my first day back. I was supposed to report to duty. They were like, oh yeah, they're in Umatilla, Oregon, guarding a chemical depot. How much leave you got left? And I was like, I don't even know what you're talking about. I was a young private. I was like, I don't even know how to tell how much leave I have. And he's like, well, I tell you what, let's look it up and get it figured out. Like a month later, I'm sitting in Oregon, which if you've done anything like that, guard the chemical depot when at this point they've done hit the towers. I was sitting in 11th grade history when that happened. And, they're over guarding the chemical depot. And so it was 12 hours on, 12 hours off. And you know how soldiers are. They get 12 hours off. They're going to do a lot of stuff they probably don't need to do.
Yeah.
But
Idle hands.
yeah. But I mean, it was a good experience. I mean, and then did that. And then I tried to go to college and I was young and dumb and getting all this free money that I pretty much wasted and never got a degree out of it. But I had a good time. I had a learning experience. And then I was like, well, I'm going to go work and then do the guard stuff part-time, and do that and do my thing. And I was still learning the ropes. Well, about, let's see, about 2006, I get a phone call. I'm sitting in St. Louis, get a phone call. Hey, you got 48 hours to report here with all your gear. I'm like, what's going on? They were like, well, we're getting ready to go to Iraq. We got to do a 3-month mob up because that's how the guard did it. You did 3 months train up prior to, and then, months later, we're sitting in Iraq.
Where was that train up at?
It was odd because we did in Wisconsin. Yeah, we went to Wisconsin to train for Iraq, and then we did like 3 months in Wisconsin, and I can't remember the name of that base to save my life. It's an old military base. They had like old World War II style barracks. It was just an old training base basically, but apparently it was a hub to where you would go train before you'd go overseas. I mean, they had villages. Once you left garrison and you went past that gate, it was a simulated city of being overseas, whether you were in Iraq or Afghanistan. And they had it, it was a Connex boxes, but they had legit people playing the part. And once you crossed that fence, you were in theory you were in another country. And we did that, and then we left there and we went to what is that base in California? Fort Irwin, California. Out there to NTC. We went out to NTC and did that, and we stayed a month out there at Death Valley. We stayed a month in the desert, just out there. We didn't even come back to base. Like it was just a simulated deal. Like it was like you were live fire, but we had that miles gear.
Right.
And we did that, and then we took, I think it was 3-4 days, and then we shipped to Iraq. And then we went to Iraq and did route clearance. So we show up and take over for an active duty unit, and we are in Balad, Iraq. So we're roughly 60 miles from Baghdad, and we have to clear the route, the main supply route, MSR Tampa or Highway 1 from Balad to Baghdad and back. And so that's what we did. We did that, and then we got extended for a few months. So we ended up doing an 18-month tour. And then I come home and did my leave, and then went back. Well, we was in the middle of that 18-month tour. I come home, did my leave, and then come back. And then we had the option to, because we changed hands while we were in the middle of deployment. So we ended up working under the 20th Engineers while I was there. So we had the option to.
Is that out of Bragg 20th?
Yeah.
Okay.
Back then they were airborne unit, which now they're not, but back then they were.
Yeah.
And that's out of Bragg. We worked under them. We were still a National Guard unit from Arkansas, and worked under them. And then we had the opportunity, if you wanted, you could transfer and go active duty with them and ride out the rest of their deployment. And so I stayed and then did the rest of their time. Come home after that, and Arkansas's bipolar weather. We had tornadoes and stuff. So I did some disaster relief, and then I transferred to a infantry unit, and I did a deployment doing QRF, tower guard, and convoy security. But then they found out I had all this route clearance experience, so they stuck me on the recon team. So I would leave like an hour before the convoy, and I would be in a 3 or 4 vehicle patrol, basically, blazing the trail in front of the convoy.
Right.
And
let's back up a little bit and kind of talk about that you just got back from California, right? You're doing the train up. You're still pretty young at this point. I mean, you're almost 3 years in as a guard, right? So
Yeah.
you're probably at E4 at least, right?
Yeah.
E4, E5.
Yeah.
So what was going through your mind on this first deployment? You're thinking, here you are, a country boy. You had never left really been out of Arkansas. Now all of a sudden you've been to Oregon, you've been to California, and you're getting ready to go to Iraq. What are you thinking here?
Well, it was a little bit of climate change, because so it's kind of it's hard to really adjust, because you go from Arkansas to Missouri weather, and then you go from Missouri to Oregon, and then you come back to Arkansas, and then you go to Wisconsin, then California, and then next thing you know, you're sitting in Kuwait. You got to stay in Kuwait for so long to get acclimated and get all the boring in processing stuff done. But yeah, I started my first deployment as an E4, and when I got finished with that, well, in the middle of that, I would become a corporal, and at the end of that, I was an E5, and then did my second deployment as a sergeant.
So what are you thinking this deployment? You get over there, you're out of Kuwait, now you're in Iraq. Are you thinking, oh shit, what did I get myself into? Or are you like, oh, this is kind of exciting.
It was a little bit of both, because we had some, you have the Advon group that goes forward, and it gets in there and establishes, territory and transfer and all that, and then they come back to get you. Well, our Advon group had to convoy from Baghdad to Balad, because it was earlier in the war, and when they left International Airport of Baghdad, headed to Balad, to where we were going to be stationed, they got hit with some IEDs and EFP. Well, our supply sergeant got injured, and a couple of our other guys that was with him got injured. So here we are sitting in Kuwait waiting to go, and then we're like, hey, and then we get word back that they've been in country less than a day and they're already injured, and we're like, dang, what are we coming into?
Right.
And as a young kid, you don't really know what to expect. It's weird, because it's like a sense of excitement and pride at the same time, but then you get that fear in the back of your head, because you don't know what to expect, and you know how real it is and what you've been seeing. But I mean, until you experience it for yourself, it's really hard to really know what to expect. But I'd say once I was there a month or so, you're pretty much just doing it day in, day out. And it's hard to explain that to people that haven't experienced it, because once you're there a little bit of time and you're there doing it all day, every day, it becomes the way of life. you don't care about none of that other stuff. Yeah, you want to talk to your family and all that, but getting up early, staying up late, you work all these crazy hours anyway. Sometimes you may be out on the route for an entire day,
Right.
or better part of an entire day, and then if something happens, it changes. You can't come back until you get that route cleared, or you get
Yeah.
the equipment or your fellow soldiers back to base. And it I was there. I'm trying to think. It's been so long. Like I said, I went my first deployment 18, 19 years old, 20 years old, and now I'm 39. So it's
Well,
I want to
every deployment is a little bit different, but I mean, for the most part,
absolutely,
you're working 7 days a week. You're working
absolutely.
long 12, 14, 16 hour days. We used to say every day was Monday, right? It was just a different Monday. Like Wednesday would be the third Monday of the week. So
Yep.
it should, but
Yep.
every day is Monday,
Yep.
and
Yeah,
it becomes routine. It just
you
becomes
get
routine.
you got 7 Mondays in a week.
Yeah.
Yep, we did that too. And it, like you said, it becomes a way of life, and it becomes a routine. And you have to learn how to. I mean, you get acclimated, but you have to learn how to, because your mind, especially if you're out there in the middle of combat, you're not one that gets to stay on base and do all that. If you're out there in it all the time, your sense of your senses are heightened. You're always on alert. You get back to base and you're still on alert. And then I think I was in country less than a month and got my first IED attack. I was there 2 or 3 days and got in my first gunfight. It's just a matter of doing it. Once you go out, and that was, and these guys had been doing it, and we're like, man, these guys are so chill, like they're laid back, like this job ain't nothing.
Right.
But we didn't know what to expect. And then when you change roles, and here we are sitting in country digging up bombs for 18 months, we were just as relaxed and chilled as they were. So when the next group come in, we were that way to them. They were like, well, how do you make this look so easy? Well, you do so many patrols a day. Sometimes you don't come back until,
Sure.
and then you get a request, a mission to go clear a route that's off of your norm. You go do that too.
Right.
I mean, you're literally driving up and down the road, and that picture you showed, that was the Buffalo. And that's where I was in majority of the time. I was in that vehicle. Now there was other times where I would move to other vehicles, but that's what they looked like whenever we took over in 2006. Now, as the war progressed, we got better equipment. So that cage that's on the back of that ended up being wrapped around the entire thing. So with that's the Buffalo. That's the IED or explosive disposal vehicle, which now, back then, that was the only vehicle that had an arm on it.
Right.
And now pretty much everything's got an arm on it. But
Well, we've talked about in this series before with some other guys, because the
Mhm.
GWAT was 20 years, right? So it was such a long period of
Right.
time. And one of the things with combat and war in general is tactics change, right? Especially the longer it goes on.
Absolutely.
Early on, you're typically fighting a war using the previous war's tactics and the previous war's equipment, right?
Yep.
So,
Yep.
and then as you go on, your tactics change. But what people always forget is the enemy has a vote, and the enemy's tactics change, and that you're always playing off of each other as to what your tactics and what your approach to it is. So,
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because I can't tell you how many times we dug up our own ordnance. Because whenever we were over there in Desert Storm, they do like they do now, and they don't bring everything back.
yeah.
Well, from the intel that we received, and whether it's accurate or not is not here or there, but they dug holes and buried connexes of explosives.
Mm.
Well, these folks live there. It's like burying it in a field behind somebody's house in Arkansas. They're going to find it,
Right.
It's like telling a bunch of rednecks, hey, we buried a whole train full of guns back there, but don't go dig them up. Yeah, okay. Well, we was getting blowed up with our own all our own ordnance. We was digging up our own stuff. I mean, yeah, granted they would get stuff from other countries too, and they'd make homemade stuff too. But it got to where it was intense. I mean, and it was just so wild to me to try to explain it to somebody because you train yourself to see such tiny details. You know, that copper wire that goes to them IEDs would shine like a brand new penny in the sun.
Mm.
But you get at a different angle and you can't see it to save your life.
Right.
You know, it's kind of like a, fishing line. If you get that colored fishing line at the certain angle, you could see it easily, you know.
Right.
So that's, and they had a lot of tact. I mean, they weren't completely dumb. They knew what they were doing. I mean, some of the things they tried were dumb, but
Well, they were learning. They were learning like everybody else.
absolutely, yeah. And it was a learning experience. It was a little mixture of fear and excitement and joy, and yeah, you'd get scared, but you'd have your adrenaline dump where you can't hardly talk because your voice is shaking, you can't stand up because your legs are shaking like crazy. But I mean, you learn to adapt and overcome and fight through it. And
So how long was this first deployment for you? I mean, you said it was supposed to be a couple of months to begin with, but you kind of extended. So how long did you end up staying there?
I was there 20 months.
Wow.
And it was supposed to have been, because back then they didn't do 6-8 month deployments.
Sure.
Back then they would slot it for 12 months, but if they needed you to stay, you got extended. Well, that was back.
Did they do just an extension, or did they just make you permanent party at that point?
Well,
station.
Well, at mine it was a little mixture of both because there was other guys that were in the same scenario, but with our guard unit, we were going to be there 12 months. We got extended to 18. In that extra 6 months, we were under the 20th Engineers. And then we had the option to stay and be part of the 20th Engineer Unit and finish out theirs. And then you just transferred from guard to active duty and come, with them. I guess that was back when retention and recruiting was low because of the war. And we had the option to do it that way. And it was second nature. It was just a matter of paperwork to switch from guard to active duty back then.
Right.
And by that point, I was a sergeant, just a little young buck sergeant. And what experience I had was what experience I had from Iraq. I had no other experience other than, garrison stuff. But, but I mean, you learn a lot about yourself and others, and it's an awesome thing. But at the same time, you're kind of like, I don't know, because it's mixed feelings all the time.
Sure.
But I mean, you get that sense of pride. So like me and my good friends that we still stay in touch, even the ones that are, completely disabled or don't have all of their born with parts. I mean, they got some that are artificial or titanium, but we all still say, if they were to call us today,
sure,
you'd be like, where do I need to meet at?
Yeah.
Whose truck are we taking?
So you finished this deployment. Where do you go from there? You just moved over to the 20th. Did you go to Bragg?
Went there for a little while and then did that. And I think it was roughly three years ish, right up there. It's hard.
Was that up Smoke Bomb Hill?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. It's been so long. Some of these names I'm having to really dig into the memory books here.
Yeah.
But yeah, we did a little time with them. I never did get my jump wings or nothing, but I'd done that and ended up did the active duty thing for a little while and decided I was going to go back home, and I transferred back to my original unit in Arkansas. Well, they weren't going anywhere, but the other Arkansas Guard unit, which is the 39th Infantry Brigade Combat Team, they were getting ready to go to Iraq. So I had the option to do disaster relief with my unit or transfer and go with them. So I did disaster relief, and then at the end of my disaster relief, I transferred and went to the 39th. And I had to do a
Where's
little.
the 39th out of?
They're spread all over the state, and they pretty much cover most of Arkansas. But back then, the unit I went with was out of like Forest City and Brinkley.
Okay.
It was Charlie Company, but they do a lot of stuff out of Fort Chaffee, and their ultimate goal is to have the whole state of Arkansas to be the 39th, because now they've got a infantry. They got a little bit of everything. They got infantry, they got field artillery, they got combat engineers. But I mean, the 87th Troop Command won't ever go anywhere. My original unit, the one that's got the hog patch. But so I deployed with them, and my original orders said we were going to go to Taji, Iraq, to do QRF and Tower Guard. And in my mind, I'm like, I know Taji like the back of my hand. I've been in that area for all these years.
Right.
I was like, so let's go. So me and a buddy signed up. We get to Kuwait, and they're having problems with filling, the strength percentages per company. And they started reaching out to folks like in the IRR and getting volunteers. So we ended up with people from all over, and you get people that are IRR, they come in with the worst attitude, so it just ended up being this big, huge shit show. And it was something, because it was not very organized. Well, we sit in Kuwait for like almost a month. And then finally they were like, oh, you're not going to Taji to do Tower Guard anymore. We're sending you to Al Assad to do convoy security. I'm like, no, my orders say this is where I'm going. This is where my experiences is. They were like, no, we need you here. So we ended up in Al Assad, Iraq, which is out west by like Fallujah and Ramadi, where the Marines are at.
Mm-hmm.
So that base in Al Assad was a primary Marine Corps base, and we was doing convoy security we'd go from Al Assad to Jordan. That's a 300-mile trip one way. Of course, you'd stop at the little combat outpost on the way there, and pick up your supplies and refit, and then you'd go. So it wasn't just a straight shot. It'd take 2 or 3 days to get that 300 miles done. And then you'd be down there for a day, and you turn around, you do it coming back. And that's what you did. But so it was a totally different deployment style, because here I was over there doing that for 14 months. And I think I fired my rifle twice, where I just got out of a deployment where I fired it nonstop all day long.
Right.
And got blowed up constantly. It was a totally different ball game, totally different style. Well, then rode that out, and I stayed with that unit for a little while, because the transfer process from them back to my original unit wasn't exactly easy. So I stayed with them for a while, and then I took a break in service for about 3.5 years. And then I played that game where I started missing it, and I started having regret. So I wanted to get back in. Well, had all these waivers, and it took me about 3-4 months to get back in, and get back in and do that. And I get to the unit that I originally was with, but by then they changed their name. They changed the way that was the way the companies were laid out. And I joined in with the same guys, the same company. It was just had a different name, and they were a sapper company. So did a little bit of sapper training and did that. And then they started getting trained up and ready to go to Afghanistan to do route clearance in Afghanistan.
So what is your rank at this point?
I got back in at E5.
Okay.
I got in. At first they were going to put me in as a corporal and make me wait until there was a slot. Well, they ended up let me come in as a 5, and I just had to wait until I was basically able to. I was just an E5 in a floating spot, I guess, because I wasn't even in charge of a team or a squad for a while, and then I stayed there for a long time and did that trip to Afghanistan and did route clearance there, which it was weird the way they did it because here we were, the 1036 Engineer Sapper Company. Well, they made a totally different company, and they basically took 2 or 3 companies. They made one big group, and then they stuck us with another company once we got over there. And we were a route clearance sapper company, and we made we was a sapper platoon. We had enough to make a company, but we run the route clearance out of the Kandahar area and did that.
So what was one of the, like, if you had to pinpoint the biggest difference between route clearing in Afghanistan versus route clearing in Iraq? What was there a big difference between the two? I mean,
Yeah.
whether it was equipment, whether it was tactics, whether it was.
Well, the equipment was the same, other than we started using. I don't know. You remember seeing the mine rollers that we would put in front of our RGs and Humvees, and I don't remember the nomenclature on it, but the mine rollers that were in front, we started having to use them because pretty much everything was desert and dirt, and the difference between there and Iraq is they didn't play around. They would put a lot bigger stuff in the ground in Afghanistan. And when you would get in a firefight there, they would dig in and fight until somebody was dead, because they didn't do that, lay it over the side of the truck, spray and pray kind of stuff like they did in Iraq. Iraq didn't stay and just, I mean, they did at times, but for the most part, when we were doing route clearance, the firefights and stuff we got in, they were in a vehicle running, or they'd be at a house, or they were doing spray and pray, or they would be hiding and taking pop shots.
Right.
Where Afghanistan, they would dig in and fight. It was a totally different type of, well, for one, totally different type of environment, because, I mean, you'd go from being 140 degrees to being in the snow,
Right.
and I mean, you still use the same equipment. You had to change your tactics a little bit because you didn't have the same environment. You didn't have a lot of concrete, asphalt roads. You had some, but not as much as you did over there. Because where we were at, it was all dirt roads.
Right.
We did route clearance out in the desert. I mean, yeah, you got packed in, you got sand dust, you got the rock and all that, but it was a learning experience, because we knew what we were doing. We've done it before, and yeah, that picture there is at the firing range in Al Asad, Iraq. That was that deployment that I pretty much volunteered for when I transferred.
Okay.
But yeah, it was definitely different, but it was the same at the same time. But they didn't have little bombs or little IEDs over there like Afghanistan. They did, but it was more when you dig up something or get hit with something over there, it was bigger. Or the firefights, they would last longer. They would dig in and fight, and they would just stay. So you either took them out or they run out of bullets. So it was different for sure, but I mean, in a sense, you were there doing the same thing. I don't know what's going on with your audio. It changed on me there. I can't hear you. It sounds like Alvin and the Chipmunks when you try to talk. No, I can see you moving, trying, and then when it does, it's like almost like Alvin and the Chipmunks talk.
Right now.
There it is.
Okay. So how long was this deployment?
By the time I got there, I did 11 months. because I was kind of on a late. I didn't go with the Advon. I didn't go with the original company because I had done deployed so many times. I had to go through the SRP to get cleared, and it took me 3 attempts to clear SRP. So I was kind of on a rear debt group that come in. So I ended up only doing about 11 months there, but
Okay.
and then I did a lot of rear debt stuff for a while. So
Where'd you go after this deployment? You go back to Arkansas?
come back to Arkansas, and it was just one of them. We had all these deployments, and things started changing as far as how the companies were and the way they were laid out, because they went from being, they went from being Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, and headquarters to they were like the 1036, 1037, and then they split us up. So like some of the units got shut down and put with other companies to make it bigger, and it was weird because we were there in the armory on Arkansas State University, which is now an ROTC building. Well, then there was a Army Reserve unit in Jonesboro that had a big brand new facility, huge facility, and they were like a chemical company or something, and they got disbanded. Well, I don't remember the details on it, but somehow or another we ended up with this building. So we took over this entire building and the motor pool and all that, and went from there. And then I took a promotion and I moved from Jonesboro, Arkansas to Harrisburg, Arkansas, to what was the 1039th when I first got in there. And it was still a combat engineer unit, but it was a different name. And they were, at this point, they were looking at building the engineer battalion in the 39th Infantry Brigade combat team. So they started moving stuff around, and they took the Harrisburg unit away from the 875th or the 87th Troop Command, and they put them in with some other companies, and they built a engineering battalion in the 39th Infantry Brigade combat team, which now by that point you got infantry, you got your headquarters supply folks, you got your transportation, you got your engineers, you got your field artillery, you got your medics group, and so they pretty much had everything they needed. They could deploy as a brigade. They could take over for full active duty units at this point. And we had to go through and get rid of all of our outdated old equipment, and we stayed at Harrisburg, but we got brand new stuff. We ended up with Buffaloes, we ended up with the RGs, we got new Humvees, we got new dump truck, we got pretty much our whole fleet. But we had so much stuff coming, we had to build a bigger motor pool. So we built a bigger motor pool in the parking area and redid some of our parking down at the bottom of the hill. So we had some of it up at the hill, some of it at the bottom of the hill, and then did that. And
So as an engineering battalion brigade, are you doing this work yourself? A lot of it?
a lot of it, yeah, because like we would go to so we would go to Fort Chaffee. And you're familiar with Fort Chaffee. We'd go there and do a lot of our training, especially once we become part of the 39th, which the 87th Troop Command, they still use that too, but the 39th uses it a lot, and because it's a lot bigger base.
But expanding your parking lot and your motor pool and stuff like that, you're actually, being engineers, you're doing the work.
Yeah, there was some contracted stuff, like the electrical and the fencing and stuff like that.
Right.
That stuff was contracted, like leveling the dirt and bringing in the rock, and we did most of it.
Okay.
And it was, it was just a fenced-in gravel parking lot, or gravel motor pool. We had, we had vehicles like that Buffalo. It was 34 tons,
Right.
So we had big stuff. So we had to have quite a bit of room, and which it worked out pretty good, and kind of looking back between 2004 when I got in and 2021 when I got out, in between that, and like in between deployments and stuff while I was home, I did, whenever we'd have ice storms or tornadoes, I did disaster relief missions, or when we had flooding, like the flooding in Pocahontas,
Mhm.
we would do, we would go on missions like that. So I did a bunch of stateside emergency missions like that, and then with all the schooling and stuff, that was one thing that was good about being part of the 39th Infantry Brigade combat team. Even as an engineer, you had a bigger budget, you had bigger opportunities and better opportunities for training, so you could go to schools. I ended up getting on the rifle team, which they did like rifle competitions out there at Camp Robinson. So I was on the rifle team out there and got my Governor's 20 tab, did all that, and we did all kinds of training. We ended up getting to do a little bit of training with 5th Group, which was really awesome, because I'd always loved watching them guys operate when I was overseas, because out there doing route clearance, you just got on the phone, you just got on that high freak radio and you called, and you could guarantee it that somebody was showing up. It may be a fleet of Abrams tanks, it may be Bradleys that show up, it may be a group of Strikers that show up, or sometimes we called them the secret squirrels because that's what we thought they were forever. Come to find out, it was United States military, Delta Force and Special Forces. They were rolling around in up armored black Tahoes,
Mm.
and then some like little old beater Toyota pickup trucks.
Toyotas.
Yep.
You gotta love the Toyotas.
Oh yeah. Well, that's what I run. I've got a Tacoma that I've got built out. But so it was cool because I got to do some time with 5th Group, did some training with them, and that was a cool experience. Basically they used us like they would if they were doing a guerrilla force training thing, and it was good. It taught me a lot. So during that SF thing is when I sustained my injury. So I fast roped out of the helicopter with full kit, body armor, rucksack, and we flew in the Blackhawk. We had to set up a LZ. We flew in the Blackhawks over to this live fire shooting house, which was in like West Memphis, I believe, if I remember right. And when I fast roped out, I landed where the middle of my foot was on the edge of the asphalt, and there was like a 2 or 3 inch lip. Well, my feet, hit on the edge, and it just dropped. Well, that plantar fasciitis tendon tore away from my heel on both feet.
Oh wow!
So here it is, wadded up in the bottom of my foot, and I'm just now touching ground. We ain't even fired the first round yet.
Mm.
So we pushed on. It was rough. It was painful. By the time I got done, I was almost in tears.
Mm.
But thankfully, I've got a pretty good pain tolerance, and I got done, and I was like, Lieutenant, I think I hurt myself. He was like, what do you mean? I was like, I can't hardly walk. He's like, take your boot off. Let's look at it. He was an old infantry lieutenant. He'd been in like 22 years or something. I pulled my boot off, and the bottom of my feet were purple.
Mm.
He was like, oh, yeah, we got something going on here. We need to get that checked out. So that's a quick way to end a active duty or National Guard career whenever you got feet problems or knees or back.
Right.
Because I couldn't run, so I couldn't do my PT test. I couldn't even do the alternatives until I had my surgery done, and that was 8 weeks per foot. And they won't do both feet at the same time. Mm-hmm. So it pretty much put me out. By this time, I'm, all my deployments, I've got, all the disability stuff where I've got injuries from that. But it put me where I was pretty much I was non-deployable at that point.
Right.
And I went to the med board and stuff and tried my best to get that, taken care of, where they would give me a medical retirement. And I was coming up to my ETS date at 17 years. And by this point, I was just tired of dealing with the administration part. I was burnt out. I couldn't do nothing. So I felt worthless because here I am at E6 and can't even do my job. Can't even, all I can do is show up and tell the guys what to do, but I can't do nothing.
Yeah. You don't seem like the type to want to sit behind a desk.
No, I hated sitting behind the desk. I hated it when we had to do, paperwork, which, I mean,
Yeah.
that's part of it. That's especially, running a squad, running a group. That's what
Sure.
you got. That's how you got to do it. You got to do a little bit of both. And, but yeah, I mean, did that, and I ended up taking a partial medical retirement. So it's like 60% medical retirement, and I ETS'd out. So I'll get that when I get retirement age. But I mean, and then right now I'm at like 80% with the VA, and then that's pending. So some of that may change too. But I mean, they've taken care of me. That VA process was not an easy process. It took me a long time to get to where I am now,
Yeah.
just because I think I got set up wrong to begin with, and then it was a fight to get it corrected.
I think even those that have been set up right, it's always a long process.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
that's a common amongst every veteran I've ever spoken to that's got
Yeah.
disability. I mean, it's a long process. So
Yeah, I mean, it's got its goods and its bads, I mean, I don't have to pay for none of my medicine. The only time I have to pay for anything out of pocket is if I go to a clinic, like a VA clinic,
mhm.
and it's out of network or something. I have to pay for that visit out of pocket, which is odd to me. If I go to a VA, you would think it'd be covered, but it's
Right.
not. So, but I mean, they pay for my, if I have emergency or something, I can go to anywhere in the country. They pay for my medicine,
Right.
and then of course they send me a check every month. But
So let's talk a little bit about some of your deployments and I mean anything that so the kind of philosophy behind this show and this series is uh, future generations will be able to come back and watch this, right? And
yeah,
hear the different stories and things. And what kind of kicked that off for myself was remembering stories of my dad and some of the stories I have with some of my friends that were in the army, and I know none of that's recorded anywhere. So is there
right.
anything, whether any of your deployments or any experiences you've had that stand out that you want to make sure gets put into the history books?
Well, because I've still have people that will ask me, was it worth it? Should I join the military or what should I, you know, because if I knew then what I know now, I probably would have went active duty the entire time. And who knows, I may not be here today to have this podcast. But telling young soldiers and guys that were looking into that or guys that are having problems, I mean, it was a life decision I made, and I don't regret it at all. It's had its goods and its bads, and it built me to be the person I am today, and it's molded my character and my personality the way I am today. I mean, yeah, I'm a roller coaster. I've got, PTSD, depression, anxiety. I got pains, it hurts, but that's just part of it. And I chose to be in a combat arms unit, and it's totally changed what it was from 2004 to 2021 when I got out. So I was in what we called the old army. The
Mhm.
new army is a little different, but it's still got its goods, and it's definitely a good benefit. But anybody that's interested in doing it, I don't ever try to talk them out of it because it was a great experience for me. I learned a lot of life lessons. It built me, you learn, it makes you where you respect things and respect life a lot more, and you don't take things for granted. So I do it just because if you could learn anything, I mean, you become a better man or a better person, and you take a more prideful respect in life, and you don't sit around on your hands and not do things like like now and here 2025, how a lot of people do. They want handouts. It don't build you to be that way where you're a fighter. You want to do it. You want to do it for yourself, but then at the same time you still have that compassionate side because you were always watching everybody's back. Now that I'm out, yeah, I'm not. I didn't lose any limbs. I didn't earn a Purple Heart, which they tell me I could have with all the concussions and stuff I had. But it was hard for me to pursue a Purple Heart that way because I had friends that either didn't come home or they didn't come home with all their body parts like they did when they got there. And to me, I don't, they don't sit well with me
Hmm.
just because I've seen, folks get killed and injured in, right in front of me.
Right.
So I have a different perspective on it a little bit, but it is a great thing, and it's built me to be who I am. So my transition home after all my deployments was probably my darkest times of my life. And I got home and I couldn't transition back. And that was where I struggled for the longest. I didn't like being around people, and I didn't like, if they weren't military people, I didn't want to be around. I didn't want to be around you. If you were loud and obnoxious and just what I considered you was doing stupid stuff, I didn't want to have anything to do with you. I didn't want to be in parties. I would always carry a firearm or a big knife with me everywhere I went. It was easy for me to get into confrontations with folks just because I didn't cope well. And trying to transition back, I ended up in a real dark place, and I I experimented with drugs and alcohol, and anything that would help me cover my mind to where it was what I thought was helping me, which in turn made it worse. I tried taking my life a couple of times. I become an alcoholic for a little while. The drug thing never stuck, but I mean, I literally did. I tried taking my life twice, and I drank all the time, which I still drink now, but I don't have the same mindset now than I did back then, because back then I didn't know how to get myself past that point.
You didn't have an
And
outlet.
I didn't have an outlet, and I didn't know who to turn to.
Right.
And I felt like I was alone, and like I was being judged, and like a lot of my friends that I was best friends with growing up, when I joined the Army, they turned their back on me.
Sure.
When I come home from Iraq or come home from deployments, yeah, they wanted to do that whole dog and pony show. Oh, so and so's back home. But then as soon as that was over, they were gone. They weren't calling, they weren't hanging out, unless it was something that made them benefit from it or look good. So I got in that dark place, and I had to find something that helped me. And with talking with other veterans, we grew up, drag racing and being out camping and whatnot. And I did different things. I used to do things that keep my mind busy. I raced RC cars for a little bit. I'd go hunting and fishing, and you'd still turn yourself back when you was home alone or somewhere. You'd still find yourself in that dark spot, and you couldn't get yourself past it.
Mhm.
Well, then I finally I found a guy that was a recruiter when I got out. I saw him in town one day, and me and him sit in a parking lot and talked for an hour and a half, and he gave me some numbers. And I called that guy at the VA, and now I'm sitting where I am today, and I got help. I don't have suicidal thoughts. I have a monthly psychologist that I talk to, and it helps. I mean, she's a lady that she has the same mindset as we do. Like, you wouldn't think that a lady like that would be that way, but she has the same perception as we do. Like, she was there. She went through it too. Like, she spent time in combat. So her outlook on it was different. And, and then at this point, I've been married twice. I've got 2 kids. And it was a roller coaster for a long time, to get myself past all of that and to know how to cope and how to do it. So what helps me the most is when I have fellow veterans that are having that same struggle or those same questions, or don't know where their outlet is. I found my outlet by using off-roading and overlanding and going out in nature, and just, I don't have to have no music on. I don't even have to have nobody with me. I just go out there and run the trails and ride around, even if I don't find anything. I mean, yeah, I love to go find waterfalls and camp spots next to the water, but at the same time, it's just it's peaceful, and I used it as a disconnect. I don't have any phone service. I don't have anything like that. So I was able to disconnect. And then just something about, sitting there in the outdoors. The sound of the woods is beautiful. I could sit there, I wouldn't even have to listen to music. I could just sit there and listen to the water run and the sound of the music, or I say sounds of the music, but it was the nature's music.
Right.
And it was calming and peaceful. So I found it therapeutic. Well, then I found that this overland thing was actually a pretty popular deal. And I started going with my dad, and we started going to different things and met a bunch of people, a bunch of amazing people that do it. And then I got connected with some veterans programs that do the thing, and they get veterans together for the same mission, help them with their disabilities or their the way to find an outlet. And most of them, are nonprofit, and they do little things, take a veteran out or sponsor a veteran, do this, or a veteran don't have camping gear, get them some camping gear, take them out, let them go experience that. But at the same time, if they legitimately need help, get them the numbers and the connection, what they need, so they can be able to enjoy their life. Because it took me a better part of 10 years before I was what I felt was normal. And I mean, I'm still not a normal person. I still got a sick sense of humor like most of us Army guys do.
Yeah.
But at the same time, my sense of purpose is a lot better nowadays. And I use that just as that's my outlet. And that's how I clear my head. And I'm not necessarily a social butterfly, but I like to be around like-minded people. And
Well, veterans always do so much better with other veterans, right?
absolutely,
I mean, it's people you have shared experiences with, right? Whether it's something as simple as going through basic training, where you had that one drill that you didn't like, or that didn't like you, whatever,
yeah.
those, or it's like yourself, where you've experienced combat. So, but when you're with other veterans and you have those shared experiences, it helps you feel like you're part of that group again.
Oh yeah, the camaraderie.
Yeah.
Even if you aren't like, I've got good friends that are Marines and Navy and Air Force
Mhm.
and even Army guys. And some of them did short amount of time. Some of them did longer than I did. And we've all got a way to relate. But it's just, even I've got good close friends that are law enforcement or firefighter veterans.
Mhm.
And in my sense, a law enforcement or a firefighter, they got the same struggles as we do. They had to go through the same things. They just did it here in the United States, but we did it in some foreign country. So I like to reach out to them as well. I mean, granted, most of my outreach is with veterans, but I don't have a program that I do it. I don't own a nonprofit or nothing like that. And it ain't that I don't care to. I like to help others because ultimately we're all doing the same mission. And if I can be a part of multiple groups, then that's just more ways to reach out to help other people, other veterans. And it's been a really good thing. I mean, we just recently got back from a trip, and I was the only veteran, but it was just something about it, like that picture there. We was at Padre Island National Seashore. I'd never been to the ocean since my son was 1 and he's 13. So that was really awesome to experience. And
It's one of my favorite places.
oh yeah, I'd never been. I'd been the first time I went was when my son Craig was 1, and we went to Florida. But then here recently we found out about Padre Island, and that you could drive on it and you could camp off grid, and we were like, well, we got to experience that. Well, then we got with Caleb Baker with Baker Overland, and he put together a trip, and we all went and left on Tuesday, come back home. I was home by Saturday, and then we took Sunday to refit.
My favorite thing about that entire trip is as soon as I can see that front gate, my cell service drops and my cell phone goes in my glove box, and I don't pull it out for 4 days.
Yeah,
So
mine.
it's a complete disconnect from the
Yeah.
connected world that we live in now, that I
Yeah.
think everybody needs to do more often.
yeah, that disconnect. Yeah, don't get me wrong. The technology and stuff has its goods because I mean I'm a robotic automation technician. I've been doing industrial maintenance for the last 15 years. You know, that was one of the good things with being National Guard there at the end of my stuff. I could work full time and get other experiences. And being networked like that, there was tons of people that had experience and connections.
Right.
So I ended up getting connected with some folks, and now I've been doing industrial maintenance. And I did some time, you know, at law enforcement. I did some time working in the prison, did some drug eradication stuff, you know, things like that. But then when I learned what real money was like, I started doing maintenance. But that, you know, I did that law enforcement and prison work when I first got back, and that was it was easier for me to transition to something like that because that was the style I was used to.
Right.
It was familiar. It was comfortable,
Right.
you know. So
So we've been going for about an hour. So is there anything else that you want people to know? Any other stories? Anything, you know, just in anything you can think of?
uh my main thing is just don't let the hard days win. There's always something that you can do to better yourself, or there's always somebody out there that's going to be willing to help or that will just listen, you know. um, I'm always available if somebody has something we don't know each other. They can message me online and we can talk. I can get them hooked up with whatever we need. I've got access to those same hotlines and websites and everything too. um, I'm slowly growing my stuff, but my thing is if anybody is having that, you know, those thoughts or struggles, there's always somebody out there that's willing to help, somebody that's got your back, whether they had the same experiences or not. You know, they're willing to provide you with the information to help you, or just to invite you out, or sit around the fire, or sit on the phone and listen, you know. And it's what's helped me. It's helped me cope and rebuild my mentality of it. And I'm happiest now as I've been in a long time. And I mean, yeah, I still have my moments where I struggle, but
Like you said, don't
what,
let the hard days win.
yeah, that's my motto on it. Don't let the hard days win. Try to stay as positive as you can and keep your mind busy. Keep your mind, when I say keep your mind busy, to me, it keeps your mind healthy. If you're doing something to stay engaged, it keeps your mind busy, but it keeps it healthy because your mind's always working. So that helps you keep the bad thoughts and all that, you know,
Right.
fought back so you don't have it as often. And then you get to the point where you may be like me, where you have to take some, you know, prescription medicine to help with things, but it it helps and it works, and there's always somebody out there that cares, that will help, or if they don't, they're willing to find
Right.
the information for you. But
Okay. All right, sir. Well, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your stories with us.
absolutely, I
Um,
appreciate you having me.
yeah, you know, we people check out, you know, all of his sites, all of his social media, his YouTube, his Instagram. He's even on TikTok. You can find everything on his link tree. Make sure you go visit our sponsors, um, Gear for Grunts, Enlisted Nine Fight Company, Alpha Elite Performance, Bowhammer.com, Marvita Fishing. Make sure you go visit all of those, and appreciate you spending your time with us. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.